Hi, welcome to this month's edition of Circle Talks. Today we're tackling research data. So we're going to lift the lid on what, why, and how to use research as part of your marketing strategy. As always, we've got some brilliant speakers who are going to talk through their experience and their perspectives. Each speaker this time is going to give a short presentation, so it's slightly different to usual where we have a panel discussion. We've actually got short presentations, and then we're going to hand it over to you, the audience, to ask questions on the chat. So we'll try and get through as many as possible. So first up is going to be Josh Stinehour, who is Principal Analyst at Devoncroft. And then we'll go to Lisa Collins, who is Head of Membership Engagement at IABM. And then last but not least, we'll hear from Cami Perryman, who is Senior Advisor in Solutions Marketing at Dell. We've got three very different experiences and different perspectives on data, but I think that it's going to be really valuable to the audience as we'll really understand how to commission data, what to do with it, and really how to use it to your advantage. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Josh, who's going to give our first presentation. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Jessica. Let me fingers crossed that this is going to work as I bring up the few slides, and I promise it's just a few slides that I will refer to. So I hope everyone can now see a big slide with a couple charts here, and I'm going to proceed as if I have succeeded. All right, so thank you again for the opportunity to talk here. For those who are not familiar with me, Josh Stinehour, Principal Analyst, Devoncroft research firm, following this space very closely. For those who know me directly, you're probably surprised. I'm much more disagreeable when I talk to an audience than agreeable in person. And I want to start with a personal anecdote. So many of you may know I started life in this industry as a banker. Don't hold that too much against me. And in every incident where I was involved in selling a company, working for someone to buy a company or raise money, there would always be this statement at the start of whatever the pitch deck was, where a CEO or executive would make some broad statement about how glorious their brand was. And then they would attach to it these rather flattering characteristics, quality, great customer service. And I was always found it remarkable just how baseless those claims were. Like they had nothing informing it that could actually convince a third party. And even when you really dug into it, they didn't really have a reasonable basis to believe it themselves. And, so I developed a very dim view of marketing as a discipline. It sounded to me it was more like theater, like doing a rain dance to water the crops. And I've come full circle. So I really have started to admire the discipline of marketing. And so this first slide, I know that's a bit of a long intro. If you were to look, and I tend to be quite numbers driven, and this is just a chart you're seeing here of the S&P 500. So the 500 largest stocks in terms of market capitalization in the US. And what you'll notice here, the punchline is 70% of the book value. So it actually sits on the books of those businesses, not their market value. That would be even larger, say 90%. 70% of that is now intangible assets. So things you can't touch or really well quantify. So that's cash, that's buildings, that's inventory, that kind of stuff would be tangible. Intangible, first among equals, would be brand. So you think about one of the most valuable aspects of a company is its brand. And you think in an industry like ours, where we measure everything and to increasingly tiny significant digits, it was always remarkable to me that people didn't really appreciate or measure their brand or understand how that was tracking. So that's my beat in this world. And in fact, if I could just set up the rest of my points, so I'm just going to revisit everything I just said in different ways. If you think about the chaos of how we sell technology in the media space, so here we're just taking the NAB segmentation. You can do this with IBC too. Put it on an axis. So this is what people say they do, and count up those companies. I mean, it's outrageous, right? So I've just highlighted here on the chart, subtitling, closed captioning. There's 71 people that came to the 2019 NAB show that said they made that. So say you're an investor or you're someone that's shopping for closed captioning. If you wanted to go meet with everyone and you broke up your day into 20-minute meeting segments and allowed yourself 5 minutes to walk between booths, that's your whole show, that one technology. So there's got to be a better way. This is also a bit of an indictment of how we organize things in our world, but I'll kind of leave that to the audience to ponder. Just to give some examples of what I said at the outset, but specific to our world. So imagine One of the things we do is our annual big broadcast survey. So go out in 10 languages and ask the buyers of technology questions. Everything down to who are you aware of, what do you buy, but also what do you think of those suppliers. So just take the first question that you would ask anyone. Are you aware of a company? And imagine, if you will, that you're sitting at the turnstile at NAB or IBC and you're just clicking away and say, what do people buy? And for those that buy compression and transport, and then across the peer group you're seeing on this slide, those are those two dimensions. So for people that bought those products 2016, 2018, top of their awareness was Cisco and Ericsson, right? Now, what happened 2018, 2019, as some people are aware, Cisco, Ericsson divested their groups that made compression products, transport products, and rebranded them. They had to rebrand, had no choice. Look at the consequence of that on 2019, right? Those now, products that everybody knew, now against their peer group, no one knew, or effectively no one knew, right? So, depending on your personality traits, you could sit there and say, oh, goodness, look at the mountain we have to climb. Or you can look at it and say, what an opportunity. We get to build and develop the brand awareness and the brand characteristics that we want. I'm simply pointing out the tremendous value that exists in a brand. Because if people don't know who you are, you're going to have a really tough time selling them things. And I would carry this on just because this is an abridged amount of time I have. So I hope everyone I'm speaking to is aware of Net Promoter Score. So measuring customer loyalty, it's something that I've come to really quiver in the face of, just the power of it, because you can measure it today and it does correlate with the future. My stand-in here, and the Ross people are good enough to let me use them. For those who have taken notice of just how much bigger Ross has gotten over the last 5 years, and you could attribute it to lots of things, but first among that is just look at their Net Promoter Score, especially in the Americas, where I'm just plotting it here against taking an average of all the suppliers that we track. So to me, for all the guerrilla salespeople that slam the table and say the only thing that matters is the next sale or meeting my quota, I would encourage you that actually no, that's not the way you should be looking at things, because the true measure of success, the thing that's going to really correlate with long-term value, is happy customers. And this is just not something you want to put your finger in the air or just believe is true, right? This is something you want to continually track. So just to be a little thought-provoking with the time I have left, when I look at the A/B test we now have in 2020, and Avid's my stand-in here. If you look at their first 9 months financially, look at their income statement, 2020 versus 2019, even though their revenue went down, their cash flow profitability went up. So what's the punchline there? What did Avid not do in 2020? Avid did not go to trade shows. And so you start to look through the expenses that went down. There was more than a proportional decrease in sales and marketing associated primarily with trade events. So if you were to reverse that out and say, hey, if you made that investment, this is the gross margin you get, it would not be a good business deal. So we have to have a real right between the eyes conversation of how inefficient our sales efforts are historically in this space, and what the wisdom is going to be of how this should look going forward. Because we have now an A/B test that really casts a shadow over the merit of a lot of the activities we were doing before 2020. And if I sum that up in a more intuitive way, if you think of every dollar that's spent at one of these trade shows, right, about 10-20 cents of that is an inherent cost of sales that's going to go to licenses, whatever pass-through hardware, some professional services. Maybe 10-15%, depending if you're lucky, closer to 20%, you're spending it on R&D for the next group of products. You have some inescapable overhead for just general administrative, but the lion's share of that dollar is reinvested into sales and marketing. You think about what is that? Well, that's expensive salespeople. That's trade shows. Just think of the breadth of trade shows and the expense of those shows. It's awards, because we have to have awards. And then you have all this like client entertainment. And my challenge to a lot of the entrepreneurs out there is, this is why you started a business, because you wanted to take people out to dinner and laugh at their jokes and listen to the stories about their kids? Or did you want to get back to solving their problems and really investing on the technology side? So we need to do a better job in terms of sales and marketing. And the discipline in 2021 that we can now put to this, and the things we can measure and how we can communicate the value of it, I think it's breathtaking. We're right on the cusp of this. The example I give is, for those that read or noticed, Kaltura just recently filed to go public. If you read through their filing documents, they had this just breathtaking statement there that looked at. Yep.
Sorry, just quickly to interrupt. We're still on the first slide.
Oh,
Yeah.
Goodness.
So if you want
All
to
right.
change the slide to, we're following you, but if you could just change the slide
All right.
to.
So I see myself on the last slide. Oh. All right. Well,
That's
perhaps
okay.
if I can just paint the picture here, since I'm on my last slide, and maybe these are just a takeaway. So to be a little more descriptive, Kaltura made the statement in their filing that they gave guidance on their long-term value of their customer relationship and their customer acquisition costs, saying even in fact in 2020 that it was an 11-to-1 relationship. So for every dollar they invested in getting a new customer, they were generating $11 of lifetime value. Now, I happen to not believe those figures just in the nature of how they're calculated or the lack of data that was exposed, but it is the kind of the first data point that I can point to of bringing in some of these methodologies that are more typical of, say, subscription and software business models and other industries, that we can start to understand the true cost of acquiring a customer and the value to the business, and then communicate that to third parties. All right, I have been a little long-winded here, so maybe I have said my piece on these topics, and I'll give it back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Josh. That was really great. We have got a comment from the audience. I'm going to put it in the private chat, and then I'm going to ask you to have a think about it, and we'll come back to it when we have the panel discussion. But we're going to move on to Lisa now with her presentation. So we'll see you shortly.
Thanks, Jessica. And I'm not going to take the risk, like Josh did, of powering my own slides. I'm going to hand that over to the experts. So just to introduce myself, I'm Lisa Collins, Head of Membership Engagement at IABM. And although IABM produces some great research, I don't want to talk about the research today. I'm a marketeer like you guys, and I want to talk about the hows and the whys you would use research. So hopefully my slides might be coming soon. We need to go, thank you, to the start. That's the last slide currently. Thank you. Okay, so we're on the whys. So why would you use research? So research can help identify those potential gaps with that your customers may potentially have, some of those issues, some of those pain points. And I talk to members on a day-to-day basis. And although this industry, we have some great technologies out there, I always say to them, think about your marketing and your marketing strategy, and think about telling your audience about the problems you solve rather than the technology. That can come afterwards. Now, if you want to understand some of those problems and some of those key points, there is so much research out there that can help you with that. So I definitely urge you to start reading through and identifying how you align with the research. Now, research is all about thought leadership, and we're seeing an increasing number of companies actually turning to this medium to position themselves within the marketplace. Recent IABM research actually shows that that traditional trade show budget has also come over to research to bridge that gap, and more on that a bit later. So what are vendors doing with this research? Well, many of them are producing it themselves. They're aligning themselves with a particular trend, and they're producing their own piece of research. Others are simply commenting or aligning themselves to research that already exists. They may be producing blogs, white papers, and actually commenting on that research that one of those great research companies out there may have produced. My tip there would be, remember, if you're producing that research, always ask the company whether you might be able to use some of the charts that have been produced, and also ask the expert whether they might be able to provide some commentary on that specific piece that you're producing, so they can rubber stamp, that piece that you produced. Some companies out there are actually producing events around the research that exists. And again, another piece of advice would be maybe talk to the author and see if they'll come and present the research findings to beef up that event that you're producing. Now, digital assets, they drive potential to your website. Consider releasing some teaser information on social media, and then send them over to your website with gated information and capture those all important contact details and treat them as a lead. Now, looking at all of those assets, we've been working with a client recently on a bespoke project, and it's really important to them to have all sorts of different assets within the bespoke research that they can use to present to their internal team and also out to the external team. So when you're producing that research, just think about that wealth of information that you can produce and share with different stakeholders. Finally, on this slide, data acquisition. Research hasn't been a traditional route to generating leads, but in this virtual world, we need to think differently, and certainly research is a route to do that. When we're working in this virtual world and producing great content in terms of research, that digital data is a gem of information to us, and it really helps us think about what is of interest to our customers, especially if we're gating information on our website. Think about attending some of those virtual events, where that research is being delivered. Connect with some of the audience there. You know that they have a particular problem and you may be able to solve them. So I'd urge you to do that. And if you're producing a piece of research, be it with a third party, think about talking to the analyst about the data that's coming back. Ask to see the respondents' details so you can then align the answers alongside the respondents. So you may be able to contact them with a specific need, and you can be personalization is really, really quite key at the moment. So I'd urge you to do that. We can go on to the next slide. Now, I talked about research and how trade show budgets have been aligned to research instead of the traditional show. And this chart clearly shows that pre-COVID, there was a lot, as Josh pointed out earlier, a lot of spend on trade shows, but that has now been redefined, and more companies are looking at that budget and using it in different ways. And research is certainly one of those routes to market at the moment. Jessica, we can move on. So we move on to the how. Now, there is a huge amount of research out there, and I know sometimes you may feel really quite overwhelmed by the size and complexity, but please don't. There are people out there to help you go through the noise and explain the details. You don't need to read the whole report from cover to cover. Take out some of the bits that are useful to you and your job title. Looking at the other angle, there are also some quite shallow, patchy reports out there that have been created purely for commercial purposes at speed, and quite frankly, they just state the obvious. Now, it's important to take a look at the credibility of research pieces, and my advice would be, take a holistic view. Don't just look at the data. Ensure there's knowledge to support, and it helps create a clear picture for you. Ensure that the research contains forward-looking indicators and guidance, and that interpretation is provided. It's also worth exploring just how independent and impartial the nature of the report is, and understand the methodology up front, how the response is being collected. Now, there's various types of industry research out there. There are IABM ourselves produce a huge amount. There's anything from understanding what your customers may be doing to understanding what your competitors may be doing, and then looking at some of those, tech trends within our industry and how they've been adopted. And there's also reports out there that look at the value of different markets. If you're looking to go into new areas, they're really great ones to take a look at. Now, let's not forget, there is a world outside of media and entertainment, and we are marketeers after all. I think it's so important that we benchmark ourselves against other marketeers and what we're doing as professionals. I would urge you to take a look at some other research out there away from our industry. Maybe look at bodies such as the Chartered Institute of Marketing, or attend some marketing style events. There's a great one out there called the Festival of Marketing, where we can see what others within our trade are doing, get advice, and take a look at the bigger picture. Working for a membership organisation myself, I'd like to benchmark myself against what other membership organisations are doing. And although it may seem really quite boring and tiring and time consuming, I'd really urge you to respond to some of these surveys that you get. The surveys produced can only contain good quality data if you're actually responding to them. And when you're responding to this information, you're getting the free report afterwards, and I think that's just priceless. Jessica, can we move on? Thank you. Now, this is my final slide, and I just wanted to point out that research really doesn't need to break the bank. If you scope your research well, you can save both time and money. Think about whether you might be able to work alongside another vendor within the space and to help cut costs and do joint research. Can you align your brand with a piece of research that already exists to position you as those thought leaders that you obviously are? And finally, think about doing it yourself. You're always talking to your customers, and the bigger picture you build up of all of those customers together, the more likely you are to see some of those trends. Now, we've all got data at our fingertips. I use a CRM system, and I think I'm just slightly anal at times, but I'm checking my CRM system on a day-to-day basis. It links with our website, and it's providing me with some really accurate data about what people are looking at, what's important to people. So I'd really urge you to take a look at what you've got there at your own fingertips. It really isn't all for large organisations. And as I said before, it's not about spending lots of money. I'm talking to members regularly, and one recently, actually, a small organisation, a new entrant to our market that's come from the IT space. They're small, they're agile, and they're really using research successfully in order to generate some of those leads. They're simply putting white papers and responding to research pieces on their website. So it's definitely worth considering for everybody. You don't have to be a data scientist to understand the data. Talk to them. Talk to those guys that have produced the report. Josh is here today. Send him as many questions as you wish on the chat. There's always time for a bit of free consultancy if you don't push them too much. And Josh will probably tell me off for saying that afterwards. But that's what they're here for. They're the analysts. They really know the data, and they're happy to explain and share those results with you. Finally, I think it's really important that you talk to other people about research. Talk to other vendors about what they're seeing. As I said earlier, talk to your customers. They're key to helping you understand some of the research. And finally, I just wanted to say, think about talking to other members of the Marketing Leaders Circle. The Marketing Leaders Circle is your safe home. There's some great behind-the-scenes meetings that are going on where you can share best practice, talk, have a look at who's using what reports, what the benefits are. So I'd urge you to take part in some of those other Marketing Leaders Circle sessions that we have that aren't quite as open as this. And thank you, and I'll hand back over to Jessica.
Hello,
sorry, Jessica,
I am muted.
Mute,
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm muted. So thank you, Lisa. That was a really sound bit of advice and a really good approach to research. We're going to go over to Cami now, and really excited to hear from you, Cami, because you're going to actually tell us how you've approached research within Dell and give us some examples. So welcome, Cami.
Thank you. Yes, I work at Dell Technologies in solutions marketing and have an extensive background in integrated marketing communications. And so a lot of what I'm presenting is kind of knowledge that I have learned over 20 plus years. So I am going to go ahead and share, and I have asked Jessica if she will interrupt me if for some reason my screen share is not moving to the next slide. So can you see that I've moved to the next slide where it says why conduct research?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. If there are any issues, just interrupt me. Feel free. So first of all, when you're proposing to do research, or thinking about potentially doing it, as a marketeer, there may be multiple reasons why you want to do it. First, you're going to have to propose and kind of pitch the idea to your manager, whoever controls the funding, or basically convince the financial arm of the organization why it's important. So why you want to conduct research, there may be a gap in your buyer's journey, in the content that you can map through your buyer's journey. I'll show you an example of that. There may be a gap in the market. You may say, oh, well, there's not a lot of research out there that's current about the issue of security. So that's why we want to fill that gap. Obviously, something that Lisa talked about too is establishing your brand as a thought leader, and building awareness of your brand. That touches on what Josh was talking about. So, in the field of media and entertainment, Dell Technologies is very well known. I also work on the automotive industry for Dell Technologies, and in that industry, we're just getting started. So, I did a research project recently for the automotive industry, and I'll show you an example of what that looked like. But we had to build awareness because people weren't aware of Dell as being a player in that market. And it maybe you want to establish credibility. One way to establish credibility for your brand is to align with another reputable brand. So you look at, who has a reputation for being a thought leader now, such as an analyst, such as an association, an organization. You may need customer insights to build better solutions, better products. So this is a way to not only become a thought leader, become recognized, build some brand equity, but also, to understand the customer better, which in the end is really our true goal. So this is an example of mapping content through a buyer's journey. And I actually have included, we're gonna send you these slides, and I also have an example of a more thoroughly filled out content map in this that you can actually use yourself if you want to. But you can map out kind of, you think about where different pieces of content that you have now fall into the buyer's journey. Is it, discovering that there is an issue, or is it then, thinking about, oh, well, so we do have an issue, and or this challenge, and what brand or who can answer this problem for me. And then at the end, they would start thinking about more drilling down to like solution and product. So this is important. And I would say when you're doing research, when you're proposing it, when you're planning it, like that initial part is the most important. And, thinking about where this is going to fall into into your buyer's journey. And it's very important because if you're going to do thought leadership, you are building content for the discover phase. And that is not a brand focused piece of content. So true thought leadership is really just kind of, talking about new ideas, or something that putting out a controversial idea, or, really kind of being the first to, lead the industry and thinking about something, and identifying that there's challenges, identifying issues. So you're not going to immediately start talking about, well, Dell PowerScale storage is the solution, blah, 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 because that's too early in the journey. Thought leadership, it belongs in the discover phase. And, we didn't have anything like that. Everything talked about, when I first started working in this role, we didn't have anything that talked about that. Everything was talking about Dell or about products. And so that kind of helps to fill in this gap, right? And that's what I mean by filling a gap in the content journey. And a lot of people do have that gap and they don't realize it. But if you really think about, the different stages and what people are understanding, I mean, it really is very, parallel to the journey that you go through as a consumer when you're going to buy a car. And kind of how you progress through well, I know that I need a car that has better safety features, or that I'm backing into other cars in my driveway, so maybe I need a more safer car. That is a personal issue. And then you think, well, what brand of car is the best car? And then you get down into, well, what model of car is the best car? So that's kind of what this is too. It's the same kind of thought process for B2B as B2C. So now when you're planning research, like I said, first thing you want to do is who's going to do this research? And even before you start talking about what is the research going to be based on, who is going to do it? How do I select the right vendor? You look at reputation. You think about, if you align your brand with their brand, are you confident that asset is going to be branded as reputable by your target consumers, the people that you want to read it? Who is going to write the report? Do they have people who are, industry experts? And then looking at their audience. So, are they going to be able to query and ask questions of the audience that you want to reach? What are the demographics of their audience? How many people usually respond to the surveys that they've done in the past? And can they target specific job titles? And any vendor that you talk to should be able to answer this. And this is how you know that you're aligned and you found the right person to work with, the right organization to work with. Again, deliverables. I feel like this is really important. We all know, just people who are on social media ourselves, we will download a PDF report and read it, but a lot of times you got to kind of be engaged enough to do that. So I'll show you some examples of what that might look like, but understanding what their capabilities are for delivering assets. And then if they don't have a designer, a lot of people that they do research, so will they work with you, partner with you with working with an agency to create something engaging? Promotion. This is very important as well. You think about this before you do before you start the project, not after. How are people going to see it? Is this group tied with an industry publisher? Are they an industry publisher? Do they have a way to syndicate this content, put up banner ads on sites? Do they have a good social media presence? Can they then go back and send emails if someone does sign up on their site to download something, to download a report? Can they go back later and email those folks if for some reason, for privacy reasons, you cannot? So there's just a lot of things that you need to think about before. That's why I say that's critical. Now, the topic is extremely important. And this is one thing that you have to remember. I have it in really big letters for a reason. The quality of the research and the questions that you ask and the direction that you take, all the things that you decide before you even start working on the project. It is paramount to being able to have a high quality assets and a high quality product, to actually being able to have a successful program and to create things that your audience will want to read. Now, implementing the research and measuring success. Here's some guidelines. Now, I mentioned a little bit about thought leadership already. So again, it's an early funnel focus. It's not about sales pitches or product promotion. There's new expertise, new external expertise to your organization. You're thinking about who the audience that you want to reach, their challenges, being forward-looking. You want to offer some type of digitally based interactive engagement in addition to being able to download a report. If you're creating a video, it should be conversational. And then I'm going to attempt to show some examples. So Jessica, if I flip over to these and it doesn't show up, then that's fine. I won't do it again, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I have actually already pulled them up on my screen. So can you guys see this now? Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can, where it says featured.
Yes. Okay, good. Awesome. All right. So this is an example of, this is online, infogram.com/examples. There's some great examples here of some interactive assets that you can create. Here's an example of one of them from the Infogram site that I really liked. And this is something that there's a lot of online services like this, but do you see how, I mean, what you're doing is you're kind of showing them a taste of like a more engaging way to look at like an infographic that then at the end is going to make them think, okay, well, I want to read more. I want to learn more. And a lot of times, you know, we're so focused on production that we don't think about planning the whole thing out and thinking about this in the beginning, but it's very important to do so. This is an example of a report that has not been yet been published, but you'll see it soon, that is coming from Dell Technologies and IABM, where we partner together to do industry research. And you can see even just having, so this is a PDF, but it's an interactive PDF. So even just having some digital engagement here, and this was created through that Infogram site, I mean, is important in terms of, you know, keeping the reader engaged and interested in continuing to read more. I mentioned that I just finished research through the automotive industry. This is an example of an interactive website, and this was created by an agency. And on this site, you can download all of the different assets. So there was a research report created, there was a webinar, there was an infographic, and there was also a white paper, and you know, you can kind of engage with it, click to see, you know, some of the results of the research. And this is kind of like the high end of like, this is really a nicely done digital piece. It doesn't have to be like this, you know, custom coded and so forth. But I mean, when you're, like I said, that's why I showed you the example of like the infogram. I mean, it runs the whole gamut, but just doing something that is a bit more a bit more engaging than just downloading a PDF. I feel like, you know, kind of helps you be successful here. Also, if you build it, they will come does not apply in content marketing. So you have to create a promotion plan. Great content is not effective if no one sees it. So here's an example. There's a lot of different ways. This looks a little crazy, but this is kind of a cobbled together thing that I did just to show you there's a lot of different ways to promote, a lot of different things you can do throughout the journey. But this shows where all of the, you know, different types of push and pull marketing, you know, fall into the buying process. And you don't do everything, right? But this can kind of help you to think through like a promotion process and of what is this going to look like, you know, at the end before I even start. And then again, here's an example of the promotion plan that I did, where I made sure that, you know, we did e-blast and webcast, and we had, you know, invitations to present, and we have the information on our websites and social media and you know, at events and so forth. Again, this is, let me go back to slide A real quick. So you have to, so like I said, yes, it's thought leadership. And that's, and there are certain things that, you know, thought leadership should look like, as you see on the screen, but at the same time, you have put this in your buyer's journey, and you've mapped this. So you know kind of where you're going to lead them to next, right? So even though, yeah, you want to do ideally pure thought leadership research, at the same time, you're thinking in the back of your mind, you know, what does this mean to the company? And this is an example of just something very simple, like, you know, here's where the market is moving toward, and here's where the new solution that we've created is going to answer what this research brought up. And that may not have been presented in the actual thought leadership, but the follow-on assets and so forth can bring that up, can address that. Again, and here's something else that, you know, measuring results. A lot of times, you know, when we think about we're gathering data, we're doing the work and so forth, we're not thinking about, okay, how we're going to show success. And it may not look like leads. It may look like engagement. You know, for me, for the page that I just showed you, you know, for me, this is extremely important that 44% of the people that landed on that page downloaded the infographic, white paper, and ebook, the toolkit. I mean, that's very high engagement. So, I mean, you've got to be able to look at the numbers and think about what do they mean, right? Don't just say we had 1,014 visits. you know, and 326 people downloaded. What that means is actually 44% of the people that visited downloaded. So again, I'm going to give you examples of this. I have also included, in addition to the references that I've shown you, kind of a buyer journey stages to help with mapping that out, and also an example of the whole content journey. So I am going to stop sharing and see if I can back.
Wow.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Cami. My God, that was incredible. I mean, I don't know. I would like to bring Josh and Lisa up actually, because I don't know if that's a common way that all marketers work, and you've experienced that before, where there's such a robust approach to you know, how you get the most out of your research. I mean, and Josh, have you come across this?
Well, I'm being educated right along there, Cami. So I like it. I mean, I applaud it. I think there's nothing worse, kind of, you know, picking up on a thread that I said, of doing something and then just hoping it works or expecting that it works. There does have to close the loop there of measuring and understanding the value so that it can form future activities.
Yeah.
So applause.
I mean, this is the way that marketing builds credibility in an organization, and shows, if you look at that buyer's journey, what's the last thing? The last thing is the little green circle that says a sales opportunity. And so a lot of times people struggle to find the value of creating thought leadership research. And really, if you don't have that, you've got a gap. And you're starting with the product, and you've really left out the whole first part of the whole buyer's journey. So why am I going to start looking at, you know, a Lexus car if I don't know that I've got a problem with backing in, or there's a way to solve my problem with backing into cars in the driveway. So.
Yeah, so it's important to, you know, get the foundation right.
Right, and that's what research does. I mean, that's the whole point of it, you know. And it's all about being customer centric and thinking about things from the buyer's point of view and the customer point of view. And a lot of times in companies, we take a product point of view and we create the product, and then we try to build all the marketing around it. And I know that's going to happen, but really, if we start with the customer and build the marketing plan around that, the product is going to logically fall into that.
So Lisa, the IABM have produced a report with Dell, and so they must have been a dream team to work with.
They were a dream team. I hadn't actually seen Cami's sort of data results there, but you know, that's why companies are doing research at the moment to help generate leads. And Cami was talking about the customer and putting the customer at the center. You know, these companies that are using research are helping take away some of that noise that their potential customers are seeing, and really showing them that they're the vendor to work with. They're the vendor of trust, and they know what they're talking about. So yeah, it was great to go on that journey with Cami from their vendor's point of view, definitely. And she was definitely challenging at the start, asking the sorts of assets that we would produce. So yeah, I know she works just like that, and she's a great case study as well.
And are there any other examples? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, where a couple of people have used like white papers in the right way, but are there any specific examples of how you've seen marketers kind of turn research into real actionable marketing strategy? And to you as well, Josh, if you can have a think about that.
Oh, well, I don't want to be the bucket of cold water here, but maybe I'm the other voice. I'm very distrustful of white papers and where that discipline has gotten to in our world, because it's kind of a real kind of few shallow statements up front. You know, point to the Cisco VNI index, or the world has changed, buy my product. So to me, I don't think we should throw everything into the same bucket. If you actually have some novel thoughts, some proprietary data that is actually going to be, you know, viewed with the customer favorably, then you got something. If you just want to put something out that you hope people click on, I would encourage you not to do that exercise. All right. So I hope that's not too much cold water. I'm not suggesting that's what Cami
not at
did.
all.
That was a much more thoughtful journey. Yeah.
Well, and something else I want to bring up too is this age-old discussion of gated versus ungated. So for anybody who doesn't know what that means, is there a registration form where you have to fill out your information to download something, or not? So I am. It depends on what stage of the journey this falls into. Research and thought leadership, in my opinion, should be ungated. Now, the way we did that one example that I showed is like some of the assets are ungated. Like you would never, in my mind, you would never gate a video or an infographic or something like that. You know, if you're going to then gate, you know, okay, well, if you really want to see this whole full like 60-page report, you got to give me your information. But I feel like, you know, I've seen it both ways. I've seen way too many gates more often, I think, than fewer. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think you want to sort of generate the interest and get them interested before you ask for their details, most definitely. And if they're interested, they will give their data to see a little bit more, but you need to hook them in a little bit first, I think.
And Josh, what's your take on that?
I mean, I guess I would go back to, if you're genuinely doing something novel and talking about it at a depth that you can't get elsewhere, then I would say that that's a superior concern than to how you would gate it, because you'll get people through those gates if the former is true.
What is novel? I mean, what have you got examples of anything novel that you have seen in recent months?
Oh, yes. Well, let me take a completely random example for you. So imagine you were a graphics supplier that was doing something novel in the cloud, and you had a reference customer, let's just pick one out of the air, Sky News, that just stood up a brand new channel in 1 week's time to cover an event in the US, and did it in a way that it could not have been done with traditional infrastructure. That would be something you would want to shout from the rafters and give as much optics as you could to everybody, other broadcaster that's in a position on why they made that decision and what the business benefits were. But that's, of course, just a random example that is in no relation, built from who is in the audience for this event.
Got it. Roger that. Okay, we've got a question here. So perhaps for you, Cami, what's the most effective method you've used for gathering research data?
Well, first of all, and this brings up something else I wanted to bring up. It depends on, you know, the level of the project that you do obviously depends a lot on budget. I mean, not everyone has a large budget to go to an analyst firm and do like a long study. The one I showed you was like took 6 months from the beginning to the end. You know, there's different levels. You know, a quantitative research is good. I mean, that's something that you get very hard results from, and you can analyze those and then draw conclusions from. So to go to, you know, someone who can, an organization like IABM that can then, you know, query members to get their input and feedback. That's one level. To go and do a large scale study that has qualitative as well as quantitative, where you actually get like feedback and people, you know, conversation and more detail and the why. You know, that takes a lot more work to kind of code the data, to draw the conclusions from it, to, you know, if you can do both of those together, I mean, that is the best form of research. If you can't afford to do that, I think even just doing like the survey is good. The being able to do conversations and discussions and interviews and stuff with the target audience is best, to be able to combine the two. Does that answer your question, do you think? And do you, Lisa and Josh, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the thing I would add is so this is the central preoccupation of my life, what you just hit on, Cami.
Yes.
Perfect is going out to the decision maker and getting objective figures from those organizations.
Yes.
That has proven almost near impossible, especially if those are financial data points you're looking to get. next best would be having a statistically valid sample of interviews of those decision makers, geographically, customer type. Also very expensive, right? I mean, you're looking at about probably what if it's an hour interview, you're looking to get, there's probably a factor of 5 you have to put on that administrative burden, crunching the data. So so perfect's really expensive, and then you kind of keep going down the trend. Okay, representative sample of survey respondents. Okay, and you keep going down, but you know where things get less expensive, they tend to get less base a decision on. So we have to make compromises in this life, but that really needs to be appreciated. So for all those people who say, hey, you know, I'm going to do an English only survey and Survey Monkey for $20 to people I've known for 20 years in English that all sit in the same geography, you know, have fun with that. I wouldn't base a single decision on that, whatever you get back from that. But that would just be my personal persuasion.
Yeah, I'd back you up there as well, Josh. We're seeing so many different companies looking for bespoke research projects at the moment with differing budgets, and they do have to, you know, take a look at that budget and how many interviews they can actually afford to have. But I think they're important to be there, and if you've got the budget, have as many of those face-to-face or over the phone interviews as possible, because they really do give more quality to the pieces of research that are produced.
But as marketers, we understand the value of those kind of interviews and there's conversations with the senior decision makers. But if you're trying to justify that to your board, how do you justify the associated cost?
Well, and I think that's what one of the slides, the first slides that I talked about, I mean, or the first section there, where how do you pitch this? You know, you show why you need the research. And, you know, is it because you don't have as big of a market share and you want to increase your market share so that therefore you need to show some thought leadership and get awareness in the market? Do you need to fill a gap in your buyer's journey, and showing them, explaining to them that, you know, this is how you kind of lead the customer through the journey. You're not necessarily getting leads up front, but you're, interesting them enough to pull them into the more, brand and product focused content toward the end, and eventually get to that sales opportunity. But nowadays, leads are, customers sometimes know as much or more than the salesperson by the time they get to the point of purchase, because of content marketing, because of that pull versus push. And so when they're going through this journey, they're self-educating, and that's what people are used to doing as a consumer as well. If I'm going to go buy a car, I'm going to know, all the features and stuff on the different models that I'm interested in before I even get to the dealership. And that's different than it used to be. And so that's kind of the same way with B2B as well. So, if you're not there, someone else is. And so, you've got to, make sure that your brand has, just like Josh was showing, that's how you build value, is getting that credibility and that, recognition in the market. And you're not going to get to that sales opportunity, unless you're, correctly building out that journey.
Cami, can I ask, we as marketeers are producing the research, but would you agree that, it goes deeper than that when you're going to your board? This research can be used in R&D to help try and cut some of the costs, so you're understanding what the customer really needs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It absolutely can. And certainly, that's the thing where you always need to look for numbers and statistics, because you need to show, how am I going to show results? What is good? What's success going to look like with this project? And marketing is not just go by your gut and I think this is the way it should be, or this is the way we've always done it. It's got to be backed up with numbers now and data. And so yes, definitely. I have not personally used research for product development because I've never worked with product development, but that is absolutely true. In a smaller company, you really need to hear what customers are saying. You don't have the money to do with a whole a division of the company doing research into what customers want for products. So you've got to have multiple reasons to to do that research. And I think it's not just marketing, but like you say, also the product development end.
Yeah, so perhaps taking a more holistic look and a bigger picture at how it adds value to the entire business rather than just one silo or one department.
And I'm looking at the comments now, and it looks like, a good comment. Also important to balance the cost of research versus the cost of not doing the research. Right. Absolutely. And that's very true. What's the cost of not taking action? Sometimes that's higher. Oh, nice. I see you pulled the question.
I did. So,
Great platform.
So Josh, whilst you were doing your presentation, we had one comment come up, and I'm going to put you on the spot and pull that comment up and see if you've got an answer for that or a comment back.
Thank you. And thank you, John, because this raises something I should have hit a little harder. What John is starting to speak to is this hopeful future we have. So I guess if I came across too negative that we're being really inefficient with our sales, I was taking that aggressive tone. But as John points out, not all revenue, not all customer relationships are created equal. So how you should measure the cost that you're going into acquiring that relationship, you really need to understand what is the value of that relationship with the customer. And as that moves to recurring revenue, especially with high renewal rates, that value goes up, up, up. And I think you could start to argue, and certainly this should be argued, that sales budgets for certain companies that have the right business model might actually be too small, and they need to meaningfully increase that budget. And if I could just put the other dimension on that, the next 4 or 5 years are going to be remembered for all time in the spend that's about to take place, moving to cloud and moving to IP-based infrastructure. And I can show you some graphs to show you that. But now is the time. So if you think you've got the right product, the right offering, you could reasonably construct an argument that even if you got to go borrow it from a bank, or you got to run some huge losses, you should be, this is the time, if you feel like you have the right product matched with those trends. So I thank John again for that comment.
And amen to that.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've run out of time. I just want to do a quick round robin and a kind of final closing point from each of you. If you've got one bit of advice on the topic of research, what would it be? I'm going to go to Cami first.
Okay. I think just my final bit of advice would be, think the whole project through from beginning to end. Keep the customer at the center of your reasoning, and understand and make sure that you're, creating something that the end audience is going to be interested in and want to read.
Brilliant. And Lisa, what's your bit of advice?
I think my end comment would be about sharing your data and not worrying about what the competitors are thinking. Both Devoncroft and IABM produce great reports, but those reports can only be great with the data that's provided to us. And don't shy away. We want to create some good reports so everybody in the industry can prosper. So yeah, take the time and take part.
Excellent, thank you. And finally to you, Josh.
So I just wanted to applaud Lisa for saying that. Let the sun shine in. We're way too secretive in this world. I would actually say, regarding the research itself, and especially research you come across, I would encourage you to be quite so questioning of research until you really understand the methodology and where that data came from. We shouldn't just believe things because they're in a headline. So some of the stuff we see, especially like justifying investments in security, just rubbish. Right. And so I think it's important to really kind of be inquisitive and maybe distrusting until it's proven itself. Okay, this is a sound methodology. This is a data set you can base some decisions on.
Excellent. So be curious and
yes,
don't be perceived as a rain dancer.
There you go.
A rain dancer watering the crops.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for, but I really want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because it was a really super insightful session, and thank you so much for taking the time to prepare your slides as well. I know a lot of work goes into to getting the messaging right, and each and every one of you is spot on. So I think you're all happy to share your slides with yes. our members. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So
for the first time in my case. Yeah. All right.
Yay. Yeah, for the first time. Surprise.
Yeah.
So anyone watching out there who's an MLC member, we will be sharing the slides with you. And if you're not a member, then please sign up to join the Marketing Leader Circle. Our next event is taking place May the 12th. That's Wednesday, May the 12th. We normally have these sessions on a Thursday, but I think Thursday the 13th is a bank holiday in Europe. So we're going to go for May the 12th, and it's going to be on marketing ROI and how to report on your marketing analytics. So come back, join us, and in the meantime, stay well. Thank you very much.